is about to start. Whenever you settle down.
Thank you. I've seen that. I saw it. Thanks.
I wish I had an authoritative voice like Lola Shudana. So you guys are ready to read?
Yeah.
Hello. Sorry guys, but we're running on a tight schedule, so this party is about to start. Hello. Yeah, let's get the show on the road because we have limited time, and you have two very fantastic writers who have written these awesome books that you need to hear about. Okay, so welcome to Arcade 2016. I am Tendai Huchu, and I'm having this book chat with Tony Khan and Leia Denle, the authors of Easy Motion Tourist and Carnivorous City. Okay. Okay. All right, it looks like we have another 3 minutes so you can all breathe before the terror on stage starts. Did I just... Okay. Hello again. The party is going to start for real now. You have two of the finest criminal minds working in Nigeria. But we'll start with the official opening. Welcome to Arcade 2016. My name is Tendai Uhuchu, and this book chat will be with Leia Denle and Tony Khan, the authors of Easy Motion Tourist and Carnivorous City. I have to say it is an honor for me to do this book chat because when I receive these books, I'm a fan of the crime genre broadly, and these two books are different from anything I'd ever come across before. They really, energize what sometimes feels like a tired genre with these worn troops. So we'll be talking about that. But I think initially we would like to hear from the authors read. I hope some of you have read the works before, but we will have the authors read and then we will discuss the books and open it up for a Q&A. So Age Before Beauty, Tony Khan, could you read for us?
How do you know he's not younger than me?
I just chanced that. A good detective always guesses, right?
I've got more gray hair in my beard.
You look like gray hair. Good evening. Thank you for coming. This is the Carnivorous City. I'm going to start from the beginning. So it's about what we call a Lagos big boy who has gone missing, and the brother has come to look for him. So this is when he gets the message that his brother is missing. Sonny is missing. 3 simple words that seemed as if a lifetime had been compressed into them. A little payload of pain and fear, waiting to detonate and decimate. Those words shocked and calmed in equal measure, like a letter bearing bad news delivered long after its contents have been made known. Sonny is missing. The message had been sent for maximum impact, and as he read it over and over again, he began to slowly admit to himself that at some deep, unconscious level, he had been expecting this message or a variant of it for years now. Sonny was his younger brother and someone who, in the peculiar speak of Lagos, had made it. He was a bona fide Lagos big boy, a member of that amazing tribe of men who inhabited a social stratum of Lagos accessed mostly through shady deals or white-collar crime. They were the toast of musicians and the jet set. But like cheap goods in the Indian and Lebanese shops in Lagos, they were always close to expiring. Missing, shot, found dead, on the run, declared wanted, arrested, detained. These were words and phrases that usually preceded comments about those who had made it in Lagos. Thank you.
What an opening, hey? And Leia, could you please give us a reading?
You think after all this time my hands won't be shaking when I start reading. For you to understand what I'm about to read, I'll give you a little bit of context. So the book is about a woman called Amaka. Amaka runs a charity that watches out for prostitutes, sex workers. Her charity gives them education, protection, stuff like that, legal representation if they need it. Now, this is what Amaka does officially. Secretly, she keeps a record of the men in Lagos who use prostitutes. She does this so that she can keep the women safe. So before a woman goes with a client she's never been with, she can send the registration number, the license plate number to Amaka, and Amaka can check for what, if any, information she has on the person. And this way, Amaka is able to say, don't go with him, or be careful, or you can charge him this much. Or he likes to go with two women, so look for a friend, so you don't end up with a stranger with him. But more importantly, she can say don't, because on her records, she's got men who women have gone with and they've never been seen again. And Amaka's biggest fear is the day a girl would turn up dead because she, Amaka, did not protect them. Now, one of the criminal elements in the book is a guy called Knockout, and this passage is about him. The dark sky was just beginning to break into patches of gray when Go-Slow stopped in front of a bungalow on King George V Road in the heart of Lagos Island. Knockout got off the scooter and the criminals shook hands, agreeing to meet at Tarzan Jetty later that night. Knockout held his share of the spoils in a nylon bag that also contained, in wraps of paper and cellophane, the heart of the girl he had butchered. He watched his partner turn round on the winding machine before leaving the way they had come. Then he turned to his house. He had inherited the building from his father, who had inherited it from his own father, and so on for 4 generations. He had once shared it with 2 other brothers who had since secured the necessary forged papers to full immigration in Nigeria and in Germany. He liked to think that most of the big families in Lagos still had family homes close to his in the shanties of Lagos Island, even if the once proud homes were now divided into rooms rented to the people the city didn't care about. He walked down the side to the backyard where a wire fence stretched from his wall to the wall of the adjacent bungalow 5 feet away. He undid the latch lock on the tiny gray gate and stepped into his back garden. Whiskey, Gaddafi! 2 purebred Dobermans ran up to him from their open cage and jostled for his fingers to rub through their black coats. Unlike many such breeds, they still had their tails. He was shocked when he discovered Dobermans aren't born with stumps. He couldn't understand how anyone could chop off a puppy's tail shortly after birth. What kind of a person would do that to a dog? Knockout unwrapped the parcel and tossed the meat at his dogs. He had been excited since the thought first occurred to him to feed his dogs a human heart. He watched the beasts nervously sniff at their meal, nudge it with their wet noses, look up at him unsure, and then sniff again. The thrill built in him. He couldn't wait. One dog snatched the meat and growled, and clenching it in his jaws. The other fought for it, and Knockout chuckled. Then his eyelids retracted as a thought landed in his head. Shit, why didn't he think of that before? He had to get the meat from the dogs. He dived into the tussle and quickly learned that dogs, in the end, would always be dogs.
I mean, before we even get into the book itself, one of the things that struck me when I was reading about it prior to the release was the title, Easy Motion Tourist. I mean, was this your first choice of title? Where did this come from?
The first choice of title when I was writing the initial manuscript was 48 Hours in Lagos, because everything happens over 48 hours. And someone pointed out to me that sounded too much like Eddie Murphy's, very annoying. And then I was going to call it, for a brief period, I toyed with Beast of No Nation. And then it became Amaka, but somebody, again, pointed out to me that, you know, you might think you've written a book for, Nigerians, but, think of the rest of the world. Nobody's going to understand that Amaka is a woman's name. And so I looked into the book, and Easy Motion came out as a nice title, I hope.
And it's the title of a song?
It's the title of a song by the Harbors Band, with the particular track, the particular version that inspired the title is by Fatai Rolling Dollar.
And it's such a distinctive title that there is a French translation which is called Lady Lagos, and that version won the Prix Marie Award this year, and there's a Spanish version to come as well.
We're not sure what the Spanish version is going to be called.
It's not an easy one to translate. But I was sort of thinking about the book and having read some crime from sort of like Southern Africa and East Africa. I'm thinking of Mukomo Ngugi, Nairobi Heat, or Dion Meyer, who's a really popular writer. But one of the things that struck me in this world that you've constructed is that the policeman is not the hero of the story. Why is that?
Because Amaka is a hero. Well, it's there are lots of great policemen out there. The police is your friend. But they're just not in my book. But maybe one day I'll write a story where there's Superintendent Sule Mustafa or someone who, drinks baraga and thereby has his visions that helps him solve crime or something like that, And then maybe I'll win the Normal Award, for something between crime and sci-fi and baraga.
I mean, careful, someone might steal that idea.
I own that idea, right? I've got witnesses. Oh no!
So, the reason I asked this specific question, I feel there are a lot of these connections that I felt between the two texts that we'll come into. But I then read Carnivorous City afterwards, which is, again, a very bleak, aggressive title on Carnivorous City. And again, I couldn't find the traditional police detective I was looking for, who I'd seen in sort of like the works by the other two authors that I mentioned. But Tony, Leah sort of told the audience about the story. Maybe you could just expand on your reading and tell us about the story, and again, cover why again we don't have we have loads of policemen in the story, but we don't have the policeman as the prime investigator, the hero.
Okay, so the book is about Lagos big boy who goes out and they find his car in the gutter and he's gone and they're looking for him. And in Nigeria, if somebody's missing, they say you have to make a report to the police for 8 hours, 72 hours. But then you will be a very bad husband or wife or brother or sister if your friend got missing and you went to the police and then sat back at home waiting for the police to find your brother. You have to go to the Babalawo or the pastor or the prophet, who will tell you where your brother is being held by some, evil spirit or something. So in that sense, we don't limit our search for missing people or for solving crimes to the police. I mean, we don't do CSI in Nigeria. Let's not kid ourselves. We just, like, I was telling somebody a story yesterday. When we were doing this book, right, my editor was a white woman. And somewhere in the book I said the police were trying and they were doing something. And she said to me, what were they doing? I said they were doing something. She said, no, I should explain. I said, no, you don't explain. In Nigeria, police is doing something. It's it's like a huge spectrum. It can be nothing, it can be something, it can be everything. So.
But then we have this unusual detective, and I'll use the word very loosely, who's Soni's brother, who's a rural school teacher who comes in because he's received the message that you read about, and now he's trying to find his brother in the city. I think one of the usual things about the crime that I had read before I encountered these novels was you sort of have order, and then a murder or some crime happens which disrupts the order. The detective comes in, the crime is resolved, and we go back to order. But I didn't get that feeling in your novel. I mean, it was focused on this particular crime, but there was a lot going on around that. A lot of other crimes were happening simultaneously.
Okay, so my thing is this, right? So this guy is looking for his brother, right? And he's not a Lagosian, as we say. He's come from Asaba to Lagos to find his brother. And he has a sidekick called Santos who's taking him around Lagos. around his brother's former haunts. So he's trying to like retrace his brother's steps the day he disappeared. And of course, that leads him to meet people he wouldn't meet ordinarily on a good day. But I mean, in the book, there's a policeman who is charged by the governor, no less, to resolve this matter. And he does, but in a very unorthodox way. Now, which is what Lagos is about. I mean, I told a story in Lagos where somebody's car was broken into and her bag was stolen. My colleague, and she comes back and tells the security guard in my office. And he said, okay, don't worry, hold on. Then he makes a phone call, and in 10 minutes, they're dragging a guy by the scruff of his neck. He's carrying the bag, and he said, Madam, no vex, carry your bag, they go. Now, foolish boy. So he has robbed on the wrong turf. And that happens in my book. So at the end of the day, he kind of resolves the issue, but the policeman can't even put that report together for the government. So he says, you go figure it out, you know. And it's very unusual. In America, there will be a court case, there will be a trial, but, you know, we have so many loose ends, you know, here. And I think that our crime novels must reflect the peculiar reality in which we are writing, or else it will be.
But in this peculiar reality, we also have your world of sex workers, the prostitutes, that your two protagonists, Guy Collins, the British journalist, and Amaka are working in. I remember some time ago reading Chika Onigwe's On Black Sister Street, which is set, obviously a very different setting, a very different novel. But what is it that drew you to this particular way of life?
What drew me to prostitutes?
Yeah, now that you say it that way, it sounds very odd. But I mean, the problem is you write about them so well. You sound like a man who has been to a brothel or two in his time.
So I'm very sure next you'd want to know how much research I did.
That one was coming, so please, go ahead.
Can I just start by saying up front that I have never seen the insides of a brothel? I just want to put that out there. Okay, why this story? It's quite unfortunate. If we had started when we thought we would start at 3 p.m., my mom, who came all the way from Oshogbo just to see me here, would have been here to listen to this. It started with a conversation I had with her and two of my brothers. When we get together, we talk about everything in this world. And she's I'll give you an example. Just now she was leaving and I introduced her to Lola Shunai, and as Lola was walking away, she said to me, I love it when I see women doing things like this. And this is just who she is. And we were having this, thank you. So we were having this conversation at my brother's house about girls who turn up, dead bodies that turn up on Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, naked, mutilated, and the consensus was always that they were prostitutes. Now, why that was the consensus, I really didn't get for a long time, but it had to do with the crimes not being investigated, the fact of the nakedness for some reason just made people assume. And we were thinking of, I think we started with, who are they? Are they from some religious camp, some religious cult camp on the way there, Guru Marahaji? Or is this something else? And we went on to the prostitution thing, and then we went on to the decriminalization of prostitution as a way to protect women in it. And out of the conversations, I just got the idea for the story. So I didn't set out to write about sex workers. It was just a conversation led to an idea, and at that point, I was looking for what to write next. So I wrote the story.
Okay, you ran with that.
I ran with it.
But therein lies sort of like my next problem. Here we are, three guys who like crime, and this is a genre that's been accused of a certain amount of misogyny. And you know, because I met a very enthusiastic female reader of your work earlier, I can say it has some merit on the gender front, but I feel these are two very male guy novels. So let's talk about your female characters. There's a lot of sex in the book, naturally. Not necessarily on the page, but it is alluded to. And you have Amaka, who uses her sexuality to sort of lure Guy Collins into helping her with the work that she's trying to do. So why is it that these ladies need to, because we have almost a similar situation in your novel that I will come to, but why is it that we have this situation that these ladies actually need to use their sexuality to get these men to help with these cases?
I think Guy would have helped Amaka, or would have gone to heaven or hell and back for Amaka either way. I'm not sure she uses her sexuality. She uses her intelligence, everything about her. You are right, there's a lot of trade in sexual favors, or the allusion of it in the book, only because that was the subject matter of the book. So I don't think, I mean, I'm trying to think back now to see if indeed the women in the book were using their bodies or sex to get on. Well, I wrote about prostitutes. They were selling their bodies for money to survive, you know. But as far as Amaka is concerned, I can't remember her using her sexuality for.
But a romance develops, sort of, between the two.
Yeah.
There is some romantic tension.
Yes, there is, and I don't know why. Maybe Guy is a fine boy or something, I don't know.
That's fine, but I'm sort of thinking of Carnivorous City, where we have slightly, really unusual romantic thing. We have Abel, who's a rural teacher, not a Lagos big boy, but somehow there are all these women who are very, very attracted to him. So I want to talk about the relationship between Abel and Ada, who is Sonny's wife, and how that develops, and why you sort of centered that in the novel, because that relationship between the two is very, very important.
If I had done a Nollywood movie, there would be a part 2, you know, after they have whatever happens to them. But why are there so many women lining up for Abel? I mean, he's a fine boy now. You know, and a smart guy, and you know, women like fine boys and smart guys, and he's coming to money too, so the money doesn't hurt. But for Ada and Abel, I mean, in my head, you know, after the last page, I'm wondering what will happen if Sonny, you know, is finally declared dead. I mean, and Ada becomes, you know, as a wife, becomes the heiress to his wealth. Would she keep Abel in the house? And Abel in the book says, should he be keeping some money away for himself in case he turns up and stuff? So, is there, I mean, I had that issue, but, you know, these are two people who have so much at stake, and I think that a sexual liaison would, you know, kind of cement that, their doubts, of course, and that's a very smart, cunning woman, tough woman. And I was trying to say that, I mean, you know, sometimes, right, we see people who they say are criminals. I mean, maybe like drug dealers or armed robbers or whatever. And we don't think about their wives, you know. There's no way she wouldn't have known. Women are very smart, you know. They will know something is off, you know. And that's what I tried to bring Ada. I mean, I think Ada knew what her husband was doing. And when the time came for her to show what she was made of, she stood up. So, I mean, the question I will ask is, do you think this relationship will continue if things change and that became the woman with the money?
I wish I could answer that. That is one of the things I thought towards the end of the novel, but we won't kill it for you guys. One of the other things that I sort of saw in both novels was just this extreme level of violence there was a lot of violence. I mean, we have these, is it ritual murders that happen, and there are certainly graphic depictions of them. And there's a lot of violence that happens in Easy Motion Tourist. So can we just talk about violence in the novel, why we just had so much of it? I mean, we got to a stage almost where it was just unremarkable. It was part of the background. You knew that there was an air of violence there.
Well, again, it's the story I was telling. I don't think there's any description of violence in the book that did not help to move the story along. So it wasn't violence for the sake of violence. It was just telling a story truthfully. And if I'd left out certain things, then you would have thought to yourself, well, is he afraid to write that? Is he trying to paint a different picture of the city he's writing about? And the funny thing is, a lot of people say to me, outside of Nigeria, how have Nigerians taken your depiction of Lagos? And the fact that not one person has said to me, a Lagosian, how dare you talk about my city like this, says that there must be truth to it. But that said, I was writing a crime story set in the places in Lagos where crime happens. If I'm to go by what I watch on telly, I don't want to go to New York ever. I'll be mugged the instant I walk out. I don't want to go to America ever. I'll be shot by a policeman. But we know these things are not necessarily true. So it's pure fiction, but I was writing about crime, and if I was writing a love story, then I would have set it in different places, and it would have been written, every chapter of a love story would be a different Owambe party or a wedding or something, But that's not the story I was telling.
And that is the story. And we find not only violence in Carnivora City, but there's also a lot of death. I remember this one poignant scene about a guy who died in a car, and people were just passing by normally. I mean, how does that happen?
What do you want him to do?
I certainly didn't want him to pull over.
I mean, when I first came to Lagos, I've told you stories a minute. I was 11 years old, and I came downstairs from my uncle's house, and there was a corpse by the side in Dokpemu, and I thought the guy was sleeping, but they said he was dead. Okay, so the next day he was still there, until flies were buzzing, and nobody came. It was like they had to call somebody to for days before they came. What happened in my village? They would say, this is somebody's son. Go and call his mother. So there's that impersonality in cities. I've seen somebody die in traffic, and that's it. I mean, people just drive by, and maybe somebody decides to call the police. But the violence, Lagos can be a very violent city, and it happens in ways you don't even understand. And I'll tell you two stories. One, my friend and his girlfriend had left work in the afternoon and just decided to go to the beach when Babich was still there. And we were sitting on the sand, they brought a mat and had their legs straight out, and we were having a drink. And the guy walks towards them with a machete and then raises it above their legs and says, 5 naira. This is in the afternoon, everybody's watching, and he says 5 naira. And my friend is like, and he raises it a bit higher and says 5 naira. And Chike just puts it in his pocket and gives him 5 naira. And the guy just walks by. So, I mean, what would you have done if it was you?
I would have given him the 5 naira any day. Damn.
So I was gonna put that story in my novel, but somehow I just felt like, it would be like too much. It was going to be too much, But the second one was I gone to my auntie's shop one evening. The light was on in the shop, and I told the guy that I wanted to see my auntie. He said she had gone. I said, okay, let me just check if somebody's inside. And he was standing by the door, so I put the gate open and I walked into the compound. And next, I had a knife by my neck. In Ikoyi, I'm not talking about Jegunle. In Ikoyi, opposite Falamo shopping complex, had a knife to my neck, and he said I was a thief. And I was there for like 30 minutes. I spoke all the outside I could remember. It was crazy. But imagine if I had been killed, it'd be just one more death in Lagos. That doesn't make sense. And that's what happens in Lagos most times, you know.
And there is a lot of depth in these novels, but I think you've come to what to me is a very important point, which is Lagos, the city. Tony, you are the mayor of Lagos.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you.
Elected.
Not popular vote, electoral college, yeah. Everything. I wanted to.
Well, one thing that, you know, I initially found this jarring in the text until I got it much later on, and it's very important for the resolution of the story, which we won't give away, was the fact that there seems to be a parallel investigation taking place, investigation into the soul of Lagos itself. I mean, Lagos is a big character. There are these wonderful digressions about Lagos, and so I wanted to talk about the city. What is it then that draws the writer to the city? What made you set this book in Lagos? Because there's this really beautiful line that I'll paraphrase.
Yes, there's many of them.
But there's one about the centripetal force that draws us to Lagos. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think I said that we're like moths to the flame, and we get burnt, and we still keep coming. Lagos, in many ways, is a garden of dreams. You know, we come to harvest those dreams in Lagos. I mean, you can have a lean harvest, you can have a bounteous harvest. Because there's nowhere in Nigeria that, you know, is like Lagos, right? Once you finish school, you want to start a job or business, you think Lagos is where it will happen, because Lagos just makes things happen in a way that you can't even understand. You know, when I was working for Hints magazine back in the day, I wrote a story. I said that half of the Lagos people in Lagos are spirits. And if you don't believe me, just try to board a Danfo bus. You come into the park, the Danfo bus is empty. 30 minutes, you look around, the bus is full. Where are they coming from? It doesn't matter whether it's morning, afternoon, or night. There are people just pouring into buses. I mean, they cannot be human beings, you know? I mean, the book, I call it a love song to Lagos. And I wanted to write a book about Lagos for a long while. And I saw there was a little problem with that most people who wrote about Lagos from one part of Lagos. So they were very proficient and versed about the island or the mainland. It was very rare to find writers people like Sefiata, for instance. Sefiata is a Bota, so Ikoyi babe. So her stories were more Ikoyi, you know. So there says his book in a very funny way, and I'm going to ask him a question here. You know, it starts in VI, then goes back to the mainland, which is what I was trying to do. How do you get these two parts to mix? People come to work on the island every day, but they never enter a house on the island. Every day for 10 years. They just drive into the office and go back. It's true. And I have friends in Ikoyi who go to the mainland only to the airport. That's it. So and this is one city. So when you say Lagos, it's not just one place. It's two different, you know, parts.
But we're not even just talking about the city itself. The city, certainly when I think of, say, Guy Collins, who makes this claim that he works for the BBC, he's a more important journalist than he is. And then you have Abel, who's a school teacher who becomes something else. Lagos seems to have this power to transform the person who goes into the city. They come out different from what they were when they went in.
Yeah, they change. First, I have a take on what draws us to Lagos, especially people who've lived in Lagos, and every time you leave Lagos, you just want to go back. Do you have this feeling?
Yeah.
Right, you
Thank
recognize
for
this. And once you're out of Lagos for a couple of days, it gets unbearable. You know what it is? It's the pollution. You're all high on the pollution. It's a chemical dependence. Seriously, you need to detox. Go live in Ibadan for some time. But yeah.
Well, I would like to go and inhale some of that pollution because it produces these remarkable novels. But thinking about the city as well and its power to to corrupt, which we see in Carnivore City. We have a rural school teacher who's fairly innocent, and he's an upright person, but when he goes there, he becomes very different. Again, can we talk just a bit about that aspect of it?
I mean, so you have a guy whose name is Sunderland, who becomes Sabato Rabato, who becomes, so many things, because in Lagos, everyone wears a mask, we say in Lagos, you fake it until you make it, you can never say you're poor in Lagos or say you're broke, just say, I have cash flow problems, and in Lagos, the more your money disappears, the more you dress better, So when somebody is broke, he wears his best clothes, because he wants to make an impression. So it's that kind of place. And I think that there's something in Lagos that brings out the base, the atavistic nature in you. And it is a coping mechanism. It's not as if you're becoming bad, but then it suddenly overwhelms you, when you do it the first time and it works. So you go somewhere and somebody, you're completely wrong, and somebody accosts you, and at first you say like, are you mad? You know who I am? And that word, you know who I am, encapsulates everything that is wrong with Lagos. Because you want to say, I am more than what you are seeing, and I am more than what you are or will ever be, even if there's no basis for that. And that is the root of the corruption. And the day Abel says it, he just feels like, God, I've become something I don't know what it is. So we're all, all the Lagos people here, they know it. They know it. It's just something that you learn to say. And once you start saying it, it just overwhelms you. Yeah, and that's where the corruption comes from.
Yeah, and again, you sort of have to read the book to see how Abel transforms over time. But coming back to the city, are you a Lagosian yourself?
Yeah, I grew up in Ibadan and in Lagos.
Shout out. So, what do you think it is about, the crime genre? I know you're labeled under thriller as well, but what is it about the crime genre? What can it bring that is new in the depiction of a city that has already been depicted in literature before?
Well, it can tell the kind of stories that have not been told by the other types of writing. So it can tell, some people would argue that crime fiction is the most important kind of fiction because it's a true representation of what any society is at a point in time. I think, genre fiction, not just crime fiction, out of not just Lagos, of Africa, is just this very unexploited thing, waiting to blow up. And we've proven to ourselves and to the world over and over again that we can write beautiful prose, that we can write books that would win the Booker, would win Nobel Prizes, But then that's to the disadvantage of the tens of thousands of writers out there who would never get a publishing deal because they're not writing the kind of things we want them to write. Who might be able to write the next million-selling sci-fi novel or crime novel, So I think in terms of just helping human beings, helping them achieve what, their preeminent purpose in life, if it's to be a writer, I think crime fiction and all other genre fiction can effectively make us richer as a nation. It's also very likely, it's easier to get crime fiction done into movies.
And so Cassava have started this new crime imprint. I think the first book was Mukoma Ngugi's book that they published, and we have these, and hopefully we have more to come. But I'm interested in sort of like your origin story. Like, what got you into the genre? You've told us pretty clearly that there's a lot of literary fiction out there and stuff that we've seen. So how come you're coming in with a thriller debut?
So it's not the first thing I've written. It's the first thing I've tried to publish. My very first manuscript was sci-fi-ish. No, not actually sci-fi. It was magical realism. I wrote it after reading Ben Okri's The Famished Road when it came out. and we all wanted to be Ben Okri. And a lot of my short stories are between sci-fi and fantasy, sometimes pure drama. I've even written, I think it's a drama with a female narrative voice, Chronicles of a Ron's Girl. But that was purely not crime. So when I started writing this, I didn't actually think I was writing a crime thriller. I was just writing the story of, women caught up in this particular type of violence.
So you're working across genres, and that's something we had in the earlier sci-fi panel, the freedom of writers to write whatever they like without specifically being labeled. But it's a slightly different case with you, Tony, because you had written poetry and 4 books before this one. So again, what drew you to the crime genre for this particular book?
I was seduced by Bibi Bakari Yusuf, my publisher. What happened was this. I had done a collection of short stories, and there was a story that was a crime story in it. And she liked it and said, why don't you turn it into a series? Then this book happened, and somehow, it was first a story of 2 brothers, it became a story of Lagos, then, eventually she said, why don't you make it, a crime? It was a battle to make it a crime story. But finally, I found out that it had elements of that, that came together. The search for somebody, requires some police work and some sleuthing to be done. So it just, happened to fit in. But I did not essentially set out to say I want to do a crime novel, with this. But then now that I've done this, it's becoming quite fun and interesting. Maybe I could just decide to turn the short story into a full-fledged novel and get a book deal in Hollywood and, retire.
But I then want to ask you a very cliched question about crime, because, again, I found the plot of Carnivorous City a little unusual, and the resolution very unusual. Plot versus character, the usual literary versus genre fiction question. Yeah.
So, now, I spent 9 years of my life writing stories that resolved neatly. Okay, I wrote for Hints, and Hints had to have a boy meet a girl and fall in love and, and then break up or remain together. It was always a neat ending. So these days I'm drawn more to stories that ask the reader to invest some of his own time in deciding what will happen. Every time people read this book, they say to me, would there be a part 2? I said, no, I'm not Nollywood, I want a part 2. To God be the glory. So people want you to resolve it, but then you can decide, how you think it wants to end. And I think it's a much more fun way to end the book. So you can also you can write the next chapter of the book and decide, okay, this is how I want it to end. Sonny comes back, and that kind of stuff, or Sonny doesn't come back, or So I think people should invest some more in it. We have some pretty good characters, and the plot, so it's not. I don't think the plot, it's privileged over the characters. I think it's just a pretty good balance. But the ending is not tidy. I agree, and I don't want it to be tidy. I wanted you to just decide for yourself what you think will happen.
Okay, yeah. That's pretty cool. I'm very reluctant to get to this stage of the process because I want to hog you guys to myself. But I think we now have to open it up to the Q&A. You guys, if you want to ask these criminal masterminds any questions, please raise a hand and we'll go through it. Yeah, I think we were given 20.
Good evening. This question is for you. You mentioned something about Chronicles of a Ron's Girl, and then there's Easy Motion Tourist. So I wanted to know if you have permit me to use the word fascination for sex workers, and I'm just curious. That's all.
Um, I don't know if fascination is the right word, but through a series of events, I got to know of their world very, very close up, and not in the way you'd expect. So I have a lot of respect for them, especially when you consider that I've seen casually what prostitution looks like in Ukraine. I've seen it in India. I've seen it in France, in Amsterdam, and then I've seen it in Nigeria, and there's a very big difference. And in the form of, sex work I've seen in Nigeria is not a choice, but a lack of choices. And you cannot but feel like society has let these people down, which it has. And once you understand their world as much as I have, as much as a lot of people actually get to, you can't but be, maybe in your word, fascinated by how they manage to wake up every day and still be whole. So yeah, you're right.
And can we have two more quick questions? We've got one here and one right at the back.
Thanks very much. Yeah, Lay, this is a question about craft and writing. Your book's really a tight jigsaw of all the scenes kind of really work together very, very tightly. How did you arrive at that? I mean, the bits giving the cliffhangers onto the next part, where did you decide how to put what where?
Okay, in my day job, I'm what you call an agile coach. So I teach a form of software development called Agile. And in the Agile world, we don't build an entire piece of software and deliver it to you in a year's time. We give you little pieces of it, but the little pieces we give you are full functional features that you can start using even while we build the rest of the software. And this is the way I've always written. So every chapter is meant to be a complete story on itself. And because it's also part of a larger story, it needs to have something that connects it to the rest of the story. And I think by writing this way, you cannot but end up with the book I've written, which every story does something and then leads on to the next one. Does that answer it?
Cheers. And there was another question right over there.
Thank you. As regards resolution and readers investing in resolving novels, there is this idea that there is no more healthy balance between personal identity and urban realities when it comes to fiction. In the past, the 80s, the 90s, we realize that when there is a fiction where city is a character, you will have the identity of the individual characters and the urban realities. You have balance in them. But this is 21st century where there are a lot of things, there are a lot of factors determining who is what. How do we allow readers to resolve the thematic preoccupations in our stories when we realize that the city itself cannot determine what to be done? What I'm trying to say is this. The idea of telling the readers to invest in resolution, we need the writers to guide the readers.
Tony,
that requires a PhD, so Tony can?
Yeah, I think this one's coming your way.
The easy answer will be that if I resolve the story myself, you pay 5,000 for the book. But I'm not sure I understand the question, really.
Yeah, I'm a bit lost. Can we take one more quick question because I know you guys will be signing books after this, won't you? So can we take maybe one more quick question in that corner before we terminate?
Hello. Lai, this question is for you. I want to know, I think we share the same interest in sex workers. I think not really because of anything, but because of their boldness, their strength. But then I want to know if you see them as people who satisfy the need, people who supply because of the demand. You know? Because I made my personal research. If there's no demand, there won't be a supply. So I want to know if we are on the same page again.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. I'm not sure what page you're on, but it's easy to say prostitution, but I'll tell you what, the sex worker in a window in the red light district in Amsterdam is a rich person. It's someone who's protected by the law. It's someone who can work with dignity, who's got kids in very good schools, goes on 3, 4, 5 foreign holidays a year, drives good cars. Her future is assured. She's got money coming in for the future. She's got assets. Now, compare that with a woman who's trapped into prostitution, not because she wants to, she's not safe, she knows that she would never, ever come back whole from it, she knows she might die from it, she doesn't even make enough money for it to be worth it, but from what she makes from selling her body, she can survive. Her father back home who needs a cataract operation can get the operation done. People can go to school in her family, she can pay the rent, she can be alive. It's a different world entirely, and again, I didn't do any research into the book, but I know about this world because I have met people who are from the world, who were trapped into it, and it could happen to you and I. You know, men become armed robbers and yahoo, and women become prostitutes. It's unfortunate.
I keep saying, I know people, I keep saying last question and then their hands shoot up. This must be an Abeokuta thing. But I suppose we can just about squeeze one more in before we get kicked out, and that will have to be right in the middle. Sorry, just one more quick question, quick to the point, and then these guys are all yours. I will unleash them onto you.
All right, thank you very much. I wasn't going to say anything, but I'm a bit disturbed by what I hear as a false dichotomy between the situation of sex workers in Nigeria and sex workers elsewhere. I think there's a very strange analysis of sex workers in Nigeria being vulnerable, victimized, not having choice, whereas those abroad having power and agency, and I don't think that's true. I think that we can see sex workers in Nigeria, some of whom also have an agency in the decisions that they make, and the ones abroad. I don't think it's right that you say that women in Amsterdam are rich and go on 4 or 5 foreign holidays a year. And I think in some ways it's tying into particular notions of gender power relations and seeing women abroad as more powerful and having agency than women in Nigeria. And I'm sorry, I'm not saying this to you, but I really felt like I had to raise it because it's been mentioned a few times now. And perhaps this is something that we can discuss later. Thank you.
Well,
I really look forward to reading your book.
Yeah, thank you. We can discuss it now. I am not an expert on prostitution in any way. The people I have met in that world in Nigeria are the kinds of people I have described. But I've also met people who come from a different world, are in the industry. I've sat with people who, in Amsterdam, not because I went visiting them, but because of the book. 2 weeks ago, I was there for Africa DAG, and I did meet a couple of people from that world. Now, they might have been lying to me, but I did meet them. And I've had this discussion very often. I am well aware of the sex slavery that happens in East Europe. I'm well aware of that, and I'm not in any way denying the existence of that. So if I've made this distinction that worries anybody, I apologize for it. But all I'm saying is that the vision, or what we think sex work looks like is different from the reality of it that I have witnessed in Nigeria. That's all. Now, yes, you're right. There's some people who choose to sell their bodies. Perfect. If I could sell my body for money and make a lot of money, I probably would consider it. But I'm talking about the people in my book who get raped repeatedly, who sleep in garbage and thus are treated as prostitutes. Not because they wanted to, not because they've decided to go sell their bodies, but because they are caught in this economic trap that forces this upon them. So you're right, there's a lot of flavors to it. I've never pretended to be an expert on this subject. I'll never pretend to be an expert on this subject, but I was just explaining to the gentleman that this is what I've witnessed, and it's different from some other aspects of it.
Thank you for that, guys. And there we'll leave it. Easy Motion Tourist, The Carnivorous City, 2 books that you should all read because they are very different from anything you will have encountered before. Whether you're a lover of crime or you are not, there is something in there for you in both these books. Could you join me in thanking Leah Denley and Tony Khan for the book chat? You can catch them outside to get your book signed and things like that. Thank you very much for coming.